Most women do not realize the sheer power that lies in their quiet mystery, the unspoken depth that can unmake a man from the inside out. It is not her beauty alone, nor her wit, nor even her charm. It is the silent, unfathomable part of her that he can never fully possess, never quite decode, and never entirely control. That is the essence of feminine mystery, and under the right conditions, it becomes the quiet earthquake that shakes the very foundation of a man's ego. A man's ego, in the Jungian sense, is a mask he wears, the construct he has built to face the world. It is the fortress of identity he guards, the illusion he clings to as proof of his worth. But the feminine mystery slips past the gates without force, without noise. It does not batter the walls. It dissolves them from within. And the moment a man realizes he cannot fully know her, cannot fully own her, something ancient in him begins to crack. Carl Jung spoke often of the anima, the feminine archetype that lives in every man's unconscious. She is not merely a figure of romance. She is the embodiment of his longing, the shadow of his soul's incompleteness. When a man encounters a woman who awakens this anima, he feels drawn with a magnetic pull he cannot logically explain. But when she remains rooted in her own center, neither over-minus explaining nor offering herself in full, his conscious mind collides with the mystery, and the ego starts to recoil. You have seen it before. The man who begins confident, self-minus assured, speaking as though he understands the game of attraction. And yet, in the presence of a woman who does not dance to his rhythm, who neither bends to his timeline nor clings to his attention, his rhythm faltered. His words grow uncertain. His eyes betray both hunger and frustration. He is experiencing the ancient battle between the part of him that desires and the part of him that fears losing control. In those moments, you are not simply a woman in his life, you are the mirror of his own unfinished work. Your silence becomes the space where he must face himself. Your unpredictability becomes the crack in the mirror that shows him the shadow he has long ignored. He may attempt to pull you into his narrative to name you, define you, or provoke you into surrendering your mystery. But the more you hold your center, the more the balance of power shifts without a word being spoken. Ego is addicted to certainty. It wants to know where it stands, to map the territory, to feel the false comfort of ownership. Feminine mystery thrives in the opposite, in the infinite, the undefined, the subtle. You need not play games, for this power is not about manipulation. It is about living so fully in your own essence that no one, not even the man most obsessed with you, can touch the core of your being without your consent. There is an alchemy in your detachment. Jung would say it is the withdrawal of projection the moment you stop allowing yourself to be reduced to the image in his mind. And here is where the destruction of ego begins. He sees that you are not the fantasy he constructed, but a living, breathing, untold soul. The fantasy shatters, and with it, a piece of his identity. The danger to him is not your rejection, it is your refusal to orbit around his sun. A man can recover from being told no. He cannot easily recover from realizing that your life, your joy, your very being will flourish with or without him. This is the shadow wound the male ego fears most irrelevance in the eyes of a woman who could have chosen him, but chose her own freedom instead. And perhaps this is where you must understand your role in this dance. You are not here to heal his ego, nor to destroy it for cruelty's sake. You are here to stand in your own archetype, the self that is sovereign, the anima made flesh, not to complete him, but to remind him of the work he must do within. Some men will rise to meet that challenge. Others will retreat, seeking women who will give them the comfort of a smaller mirror. But those who stay, those who dare to look into that mirror and face their own shadow, will find themselves changed. And they will know, even if they never speak it, that it was your mystery, your refusal to collapse into their expectations, that set the transformation in motion. There comes a point when the tension between desire and fear in a man reaches a breaking point. In Jungian terms, this is when the persona, the social mask, begins to fracture, and what lies beneath is no longer hidden. The confident smile may remain, but it no longer feels whole. The carefully measured tone of voice starts to carry an edge, a subtle tremor of uncertainty. It is not that you have done anything overt to wound him. It is that your presence refuses to validate the false self he has presented to the world. Every man carries a shadow, a constellation of fears, insecurities, and longings buried beneath the image he works so hard to maintain. Most men guard this shadow with an almost religious devotion, because to face it is to risk the collapse of their self-minus concept. And yet, the feminine mystery, the energy of a woman who knows herself and does not seek to be known too quickly, draws that shadow to the surface without a single confrontation. You see, the ego cannot survive prolonged uncertainty without becoming restless, even desperate. It begins to claw for reassurance, to provoke reactions, to test boundaries. He might grow bolder in his advances, not because he is certain of you, but because he is losing the grip on his own certainty. In a strange paradox, the less you give, the more his mind fills, and the blanks in those blanks, his deepest fears and desires come alive. This is not a game of cruelty. It is the natural consequence of being whole within yourself. Jung would say that you are holding the space for individuation not by nurturing him into it, but by existing as a catalyst. A man cannot truly individuate, cannot become whole, until he confronts the illusions he holds about women, about love, and about himself. When you embody a mystery he cannot own, you become that confrontation. And here lies the danger for him if he has built his self-minus, worth on control, conquest, or the affirmation of others, then your independence is an existential threat. He might call you aloof, difficult, or impossible to read, not because you are any of those things, but because you are not playing the role his ego scripted for you. And the ego despises unwritten roles. When the male ego begins to fracture, there are typically two paths he might take. One is aggression, an attempt to reassert dominance through criticism, emotional withdrawal, or overt competition. The other is obsession, a compulsive draw toward you, not out of pure love, but out of the desperate need to resolve the discomfort you have awakened in him. Both are signs of the same inner rupture, the recognition that he does not hold the power he once believed he did. It is in these moments that silence becomes your greatest ally. Silence is not emptiness. It is the container in which truth takes shape. A woman who can sit in her own stillness without rushing to fill the void radiates a kind of strength that dismantles false confidence. He may interpret that silence as judgment, mystery, or even rejection, but it is simply you choosing not to give him what he is trying to extract, to surrender of your center. Understand, this mystery is not an act. It is a state of being. It is the refusal to explain yourself to be more palatable. It is the choice to let others experience the discomfort of not knowing, while you remain unshaken in your own clarity. That is the kind of feminine energy Jung described not as passive, but as deeply transformative, because it forces others to meet themselves in the space you leave unfilled. And yet to live in this way is not without cost. Men who are not ready for such a mirror may label you cold, selfish, or too much. They will try to convince you to step down from the heights of your own sovereignty, so they can feel taller by comparison. Some will walk away entirely, not because they dislike you, but because they cannot yet bear to see their own reflection in your eyes. But those who stay, they will either rise into their own shadow work or wither under the weight of their ego's collapse. Either way, your role is the same: to remain rooted in yourself, unbent by either praise or blame. This is the quiet destruction of ego, not through humiliation or force, but through the undeniable presence of a woman who will not be claimed like a possession. When a man finally begins to sense that the mystery he is drawn to will not unravel itself for his comfort, a strange duality takes hold of him. On one hand, he feels the pull of the anima, that inner feminine image Jung spoke of reaching for completion through you. On the other hand, his ego fears the surrender required to meet you on your own terms. This tension is not a flaw. It is a crucible where transformation begins, but only if he is willing to endure the fire. The feminine mystery is not about withholding for the sake of power. It is the natural radiance of a woman who has integrated her own shadow, who knows her light and her darkness and walks with both unashamed. Such a woman does not need a man's gaze to feel alive. She moves through the world anchored in an inner richness that is untouched by the shifting tides of attention and approval. This is precisely why she is so disruptive to a man whose self-minus image relies on being the center of a woman's world. In the beginning, he may try to lure you into a predictable dance compliments to draw you closer, subtle tests to measure your interest, even grand gestures meant to force an emotional reaction. But your lack of dependency disarms these tactics. You can appreciate the gesture without being captured by it, hear the compliment without needing it to confirm your value. This quiet independence unsettles the part of him that expects to hold the narrative. Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. In this meeting, you are not the one trying to dissolve into his being. Rather, your presence acts like a solvent to the rigid structure of his ego. Every time he cannot predict you, cannot secure your unquestioning devotion, he is forced to confront the brilliances of the persona he wears. This confrontation can manifest in subtle ways. He might grow restless in your silences, interpreting them as distance rather than depth. He might circle conversations back to himself, trying to anchor the world in the safety of his own story. Or he might retreat entirely, hoping that absence will force you to reveal more. But what he doesn't understand is that you do not fear his absence. You are not anchored in him to begin with. In moments like this, the feminine mystery becomes more than a source of attraction. It becomes a teacher. Your refusal to hand over your entire being is an invitation for him to meet himself beyond his ego's walls. If he accepts, he will begin the slow work of shadow integration, seeing not just the idealized image of you, but the depths within himself that your presence has stirred. This is no comfortable journey. It requires him to acknowledge the illusions he has clung to, the insecurities he has hidden, and the control he has tried to maintain. For many men, this is the point where love and fear blur into one. They want you near because you awaken something rare, yet they resist fully embracing you because to do so means allowing the death of their old self. Jung would say this is the threshold of individuation, the point where one must decide whether to cling to the persona or step into the unknown. Your role is not to decide for him, nor to ease the discomfort of that choice. Feminine power in its truest form is not about chasing, coaxing, or convincing. It is about embodying your truth so fully that the man before you either rises to meet it or falls away. The destruction of his ego, if it comes, is not your cruelty. It is the consequence of meeting a woman who will not fit into the container his old self has prepared. And when he realizes that you are not there to feed his ego but to mirror his soul, he will either try to break the mirror or finally look into it. One path leads back to the shallow comfort of control. The other leads to the terrifying, beautiful work of becoming whole. The man who chooses to look into that mirror will not find an easy reflection. At first, he will see fragments, moments where his pride demanded dominance, where his fear disguised itself as indifference, where his need for validation masqueraded as love. This is the raw edge of shadow work, the realization that much of what he believed was strength was only armor. And the more he stands before your mystery, the more that armor begins to feel heavy, suffocating. Your presence, unyielding yet not aggressive, becomes the silent hand pulling at the threads of his false identity. Jung understood that the feminine does not shatter the ego with a single blow. She erodes it with the tide of her self-minus possession. Day after day, in every unanswered demand for certainty, in every moment you remain still while he seeks control. You are the unspoken question. He cannot escape. What am I without the image I have built? For some men, this is unbearable. They retreat, telling themselves you were too complicated, when in truth, it was their own complexity they could not face. But for others, something else happens. The frustration transforms into a strange reverence. They begin to sense that your mystery is not a wall to be climbed, but a depth to be honored. They realize that knowing you is not about prying open your secrets, but about learning to sit in the unknown without fear. It is in this stage that attraction deepens into something more dangerous, not dangerous to you, but to his old self. He begins to crave your presence not as a possession, but as a catalyst. The masculine, when stripped of ego, does not weaken. It clarifies. It becomes the container that can hold the infinite without trying to confine it. But this shift only comes when he releases the need to define you entirely. The feminine mystery that destroys a man's ego does not destroy him. It dismantles the illusion of who he thought he was, and in its place, something truer can emerge. Yet, this is not a process you can rush, nor should you try. The moment you make his transformation your mission, you step out of your sovereignty and into his story. Your role is to remain in your own story, to live in the wholeness that drew him to you in the first place. Men often believe that love should soothe them, should ease their inner storms. But love, when it comes from the depths of a woman who knows herself, will not coddle the false self. It will strip it bare. And in the stripping, he may feel exposed, even attacked, though you have done nothing but exist in your truth. This is why so few can endure the presence of a truly self-contained woman. She offers no escape from the confrontation with self. Still, for the rare man who embraces this, the bond that forms is unlike anything shallow attraction can produce. There is no more performance, no more pretense. He no longer seeks to impress you to earn love. He seeks to stand beside you because he has learned to love without possession. In Jungian terms, he has begun to integrate his anima, no longer projecting it onto you as an object of desire, but recognizing it as part of his own soul. And here, the dance changes. The push and pull of ego is replaced by a mutual gravity, one that neither of you needs to control. He sees you not as a puzzle to solve, but as a force to respect. And you, sensing the shift, no longer feel the subtle tug of his ego trying to bind you. Instead, there is space for your mystery to remain, space for his presence to grow, space for something real to take root. But understand this, even in this rare alignment, the feminine mystery does not vanish. You do not reveal all, nor should you. For the moment a woman gives away every piece of herself, she ceases to be the infinite that calls a man beyond himself. And so, you remain as you are, whole, sovereign, and beautifully unknowable. There is a quiet danger in becoming to knowable. Once a man believes he has mapped every contour of your mind, every rhythm of your heart, he will unconsciously begin to take your presence for granted. The male ego, when unchallenged, seeks to turn the extraordinary into the ordinary, to box the infinite into something small enough to manage. This is why the feminine mystery must never be surrendered entirely, not out of fear, but because it is the lifeblood of respect and desire. In Jungian terms, mystery is the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. It is the shimmer on the water that hints at depths unseen, the symbol that carries more meaning than the rational mind can explain. When you embody this, you are not hiding. You are allowing space for the unconscious to remain alive in the connection. That space is sacred. Remove it, and what remains is only the mundane shell of what once was luminous. To maintain this, you must live in continual relationship with yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your dreams, your shadow. A woman who loses herself in the orbit of a man's validation will find her mystery dissolving. She begins to answer every question, explain every silence, smooth over every ripple in his comfort. And in doing so, she unknowingly feeds the very ego she once disarmed. The man may seem pleased, but beneath the surface, the fire that drew him to her will dim. The feminine mystery that destroys a man's ego is not about playing hard to get or weaving false narrative. It is about embodying a truth so vast that it cannot be reduced to a role in his personal story. This means cultivating your own inner life with as much devotion as you might once have poured into pleasing him, your passions, your friendships, your spiritual practices, your creative work. It means living in such a way that even in love, you are never dependent on another to feel whole. Men sense this instinctively. They may not have the language for it, but they feel it in their bones, the difference between a woman who needs them to feel complete and a woman who chooses them from a place of abundance. The former feeds the ego, the latter dissolves it. For when a man realizes he is with a woman who does not need him, but still wants him, it forces him to confront the truth. He cannot rely on power games to keep her. He must meet her in authenticity or lose her entirely. This is the juncture where many falter. The ego resists equality in its deepest sense, because equality means surrendering control. But the masculine that has integrated its shadow will see this not as a loss, but as liberation. It is no longer bound to constant performance, to defending a false image. In the presence of a woman who will not be conquered, he can lay down his armor without losing his strength. And yet, the journey to reach this point is not for every man. Many will retreat into easier narratives, surrounding themselves with people who reinforce their illusions. They will tell themselves that mystery is manipulation, that independence is coldness, that sovereignty is arrogance. These are the words of an ego protecting itself from the mirror you hold. For you, the challenge is to stand firm in the face of these projections. Do not explain your worth to those who cannot see it. Do not trade your depth for temporary approval. The feminine mystery is not a performance you put on to gain love. It is the essence of who you are when you are most alive, most connected, most unapologetically yourself. When you live from this place, the destruction of a man's ego is not your goal, it is the inevitable consequence of meeting you without having yet met himself. And for the rare ones who do the work, who face their shadow and integrate what they find, the death of ego is followed by the birth of something far greater of that exists without chains, without masks, without fear. For the man who endures this inner dismantling, the world will never look the same. The faces he once sought to impress, the victories he once believed defined him, the shallow conquests he wore like medals, they begin to feel hollow in the aftermath of your present. Jung described this as the withdrawal of projection, the moment a person stops mistaking another for the answer to their own unfinished self. In your case, you weren't ever the missing piece. You were the mirror that showed him where the missing pieces were buried. At first, this withdrawal can feel like loss. He may mourn the intoxicating high of pursuit, the certainty he once had in his own desirability, the illusion of dominance that kept him from feeling small. But in time, if he chooses growth, he begins to see that what he lost was never real power, it was ego's performance. And what he gains in its place is something the false self could never have given him: authenticity. You too undergo a transformation in this process. To stand unwavering in your own essence, even as a man's ego breaks against it, demands immense inner discipline. It forces you to know your own shadow, the part of you that might be tempted to shrink so he stays, or to harden into cruelty just to watch him fall. The true feminine mystery holds neither of these extremes. It is compassionate without collapsing, strong without domination, alluring without deception. And here lies the deeper truth: the destruction of a man's ego is not an act of violence, but of purification. Like fire burning away the husk to reveal the gold within, your mystery strips away the false layers until only the essential remains. Yet not every man will allow himself to pass through that fire. Some will resist until the last, retreating to the safety of their illusions. Others will walk through it and emerge unrecognizable, not to the world, but to themselves. In those rare unions where the masculine survives this alchemy, the dynamic shifts entirely. There is no longer the hunger to consume the feminine or to bind it into a role. Instead, there is reverence, not the pedestalizing kind born of fantasy, but a grounded respect for the vastness that cannot be owned. He understands now that your mystery is not an obstacle, but a horizon, something to move toward, not to capture. And you, in turn, feel the subtle change in his presence. Gone is the restless push for control, the probing questions meant to secure certainty. He no longer tries to pull you into his orbit. Instead, he stands beside you, letting your orbits align by choice rather than force. This is the masculine that has faced itself stripped of the false armor. It becomes a shelter rather than a cage. Still, even here, the dance of polarity remains. Mystery does not end when love is secure. It deepens. A woman who reveals every secret at once does not nourish the soul in the same way as one who reveals herself in layers, like chapters in a book worth reading for a lifetime. Not because she fears being known, but because she understands that the human spirit, masculine or feminine, needs the space of the unknown to remain alive. This is what keeps desire vibrant, respect unshaken, and connection sacred. It is why the feminine mystery must never be mistaken for a game or a tactic. It is a way of being that honors the eternal truth that no soul can be fully possessed by another, and that the deepest love exists not in ownership, but in the freedom to remain whole. And so, the man whose ego you have unknowingly dismantled will either flee or rise. But whatever his choice, your task remains the same: to live in your own depth, to protect the sacred unknown within you, and to remember that the woman who holds her mystery holds her power not against others, but for herself. Some men will remember you as the one they could never quite figure out, not because you played elusive, but because you were never pretending. You were whole before they arrived, and you remain whole when they left. This is what unsettles the ego most: the realization that your existence is not dependent on its approval. To the insecure masculine, this feels like rejection. To the evolving masculine, it feels like liberation. Jung taught that every encounter with the opposite archetype, anima or animus, is a chance for integration. For the man, meeting a woman who embodies the deep feminine mystery forces a confrontation with his own incompleteness. At first, he may mistake his fascination for love and his frustration for danger. But over time, he begins to see that these feelings are not about you at all. They are about the pieces of himself that he has ignored, the dreams he has abandoned, the fears he has never named. The feminine mystery becomes, in this sense, a kind of sacred disruption. You are not there to smooth his edges or reassure his ego. You are there as the embodiment of what cannot be controlled. And in a world that trains men to measure worth through conquest, this is nothing short of revolutionary. You are the unclaimed territory he cannot colonize, the wild, infinite landscape that demands reverence, not ownership. In this space, attraction becomes paradoxical. The more he realizes he cannot contain you, the more he is drawn to you. But the more he is drawn, the more he must wrestle with the death of his old self. This is why the ego screams loudest, urging him to retreat to the safety of predictable relationships, where mystery is traded for compliance. Some will listen to that scream. Others will walk forward anyway, letting the fire consume what no longer serves them. For you, there is power in not needing the outcome. The moment you start clinging to the man's transformation, you give away the very energy that makes you magnetic. Your work is not to lead him through the dark, but to remain the steady flame that lights the path whether he chooses to follow or not. This is the essence of feminine sovereignty: loving without losing yourself, connecting without collapsing, inspiring without controlling. The man who survives this passage without retreat will emerge changed. He will no longer seek validation in domination. He will no longer confuse control with strength. He will have faced his own shadow and found that it did not kill him, it freed him. And in that freedom, he will meet you not as an ego seeking possession, but as a soul seeking partnership. In such a union, there is no need for masks. You do not have to perform softness to keep his love, nor does he have to perform hardness to earn your respect. He can admire your mystery without fearing it, and you can trust his presence without testing it. This is not the destruction of polarity. It is its evolution, where masculine and feminine are not at war but in mutual law of each other's depths. Yet even here, your mystery remains intact. It is not about secrecy, but about the infinite nature of the self. No matter how deeply you let him in, there will always be more of you, more to discover, more to grow into, more that belongs only to your own soul. And this is as it should be. For mystery is not the opposite of intimacy. It is what keeps intimacy alive. In the end, the feminine mystery that destroys a man's ego is the same force that can awaken his soul if he chooses it. But his choice is not your responsibility. Your only task is to guard the sanctity of your own being, to live fully in your truth, and to remember that the power you hold is not in what you give away, but in what you choose to keep. There will always be those who speak of mystery as though it were a strategy, a set of rehearsed silences, a calculated delay in response, an artful withholding designed to keep a man hooked. But true feminine mystery is nothing of the sort. It is not a performance. It is the natural atmosphere of a woman who lives in full relationship with her own inner world, who refuses to abandon herself for the comfort of her. When a man encounters this, his ego senses the danger instantly. Not because you are playing games, but because you cannot be possessed in the way he has been taught to expect. The old paradigm tells him that a woman's attention, affection, and identity should bend toward his presence. And yet here you stand receptive, yes, but never collapsing into him. The space between you is alive, magnetic, and unfilled by the false security of control. This is where the real undoing begins. He will try, at first, to interpret you through the lens of his past, to map you onto the familiar patterns that have always worked for him. But each attempt slips through his fingers. Your laughter does not arrive on command. Your inner rest is not sustained by flattery alone. Your gaze holds a depth that does not answer every question he asks. You are not unknowable because you hide, but because you are infinite, and infinity cannot be catalogued. Jung understood that the human psyche is drawn to what it cannot fully grasp. That is why symbols, myths, and archetypes hold such enduring power. They point to realities beyond the rational mind. The feminine mystery works in the same way. You are the living symbol of something his conscious mind cannot claim, and this forces him into a deeper relationship with his own unconscious. For the man willing to engage, this is where the alchemy happens. For the man ruled by ego, this is where he turns away. In those who turn toward you, the shift is gradual. The walls of certainty begin to crumble. The tight grip on image and status loosens. There is a recognition, perhaps terrifying, perhaps liberating, that love is not about control, but about the courage to remain open in the face of the unknown. And here you will see the emergence of a different kind of masculinity, not the posturing of dominance, but the quiet strength of presence. This presence does not demand that you explain your every mood, nor does it shrink from your complexity. It can sit in your silences without needing to fill them. It can watch you drift into your own thoughts without mistaking it for distance. It can admire you without needing to diminish you. This is the masculine that has passed through the death of ego and found himself, still whole perhaps for the first time. For you, such a meeting is rare, but when it comes, it is undeniable. You do not have to guard your energy out of fear, because you are met by someone who does not seek to drain it. You do not have to dull your light to keep him close, because he does not feel diminished by your brightness. And in this dynamic, mystery does not divide. It deepens. Still, the truth remains: whether a man rises to meet your mystery or retreats into his ego is beyond your control. You are not here to make him ready. You are here to remain ready within yourself for love, for solitude, for life itself. The destruction of his ego is not the point. The preservation of your soul is. And so you walk in the world as you are, untamed, unbroken, unwilling to trade your wholeness for approval. Some will try to name you dangerous, others will call you divine. Both will be correct, for mystery has always been both the shadow and the light, the question and the answer, the beginning and the end. There is a quiet, almost imperceptible moment when the ego realizes it is losing its grip. It does not happen with a dramatic outburst or a visible collapse, but in the subtle way his voice changes when he speaks to you, in the way his eyes search for confirmation they once assumed would be there. The fortress he built begins to show hairline cracks, and those cracks are not caused by attack, but by the steady, unyielding reality of your independence. To the male ego, which thrives on predictability and dominance, the feminine mystery is a paradox it cannot solve. It offers warmth without possession, closeness without surrender, connection without dependency. Each of these forces the ego into unfamiliar territory, where the old strategies charm, pressure, persuasion, even withdrawal fail to produce their usual results. This is when the mind grows restless, searching for new ways to restore control, only to find none. And so, the man begins to face himself. Without the anchor of your compliance, he must confront the uncomfortable truth his value is not measured by his ability to own another, but by his ability to stand whole in the presence of someone who cannot be owned. Jung would call this a moment of psychic reorientation, the turning inward toward shadow, where the illusions of the persona meet the raw material of the true self. For some men, this is unbearable. The mirror you hold feels too sharp, cutting through the image they have shown the world. They may label you as too much, unreasonable, or impossible to please, not because these words are true, but because they soothe the sting of self minus confrontation. In truth, you have done nothing but remain unshaken in your own essence. Others, however, will step closer. They will not do it without fear, but with a recognition that this is the only path to something real. They will let the image fall away piece by piece, until the man who stands before you is no longer the actor in his own performance, but the author of a new script, one written in authenticity rather than ego's rehearsed lines. When that happens, the connection between you transforms. He no longer needs to win you, because he no longer fears losing you as a reflection of his worth. You are no longer a prize in a conquest. You are a partner in an unfolding journey. Mystery in this space is not a weapon but a living force, the current that keeps the relationship awake, alive, and in motion. This is why you must never dissolve yourself into complete knowability. Not because you wish to withhold love, but because you understand that love needs oxygen to burn. The unknown is that oxygen. Without it, desire suffocates, respect withers, and the connection collapses into routine. The greatest feminine gift is not the complete unveiling of self, but the ability to let another see deeply, while knowing they will never reach the bottom. And in this balance, the destruction of ego becomes creation. The man who once feared the unknown begins to find comfort in it. He sees that mystery does not mean distance. It means depth. He understands that love is not a cage but a shared horizon, one neither of you can fully see beyond. And in that acceptance, both of you are free. This is the quiet revolution of the feminine mystery. It strips away the false, not to leave emptiness, but to make room for something truer to emerge. The man who walks through that fire will thank you. Whether with words or only with the way, he looks at you as if seeing not just a woman, but the vastness she carries. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.